So the Las Vegas Raiders quarterback drama is on its peak. They are clearly in need of a quarterback, and over the past few weeks, there have been a lot of rumors and reports, especially after the Raiders hired their offensive coordinator Chip Kelly and, more importantly, their head coach Pete Carroll. This has led to plenty of speculation about who will be the Raiders' next quarterback. Let's discuss what's going on and analyze the situation. What's up, buddies? Welcome back. If you are new here, make sure you hit the subscribe button. We cover all AFC West news here on this channel. Some people have suggested Russell Wilson, and that idea does make sense on the surface. After all, Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson have history together. Carroll brought Wilson into the league, and they won a Super Bowl together. So naturally, some believe there's a chance Wilson could join the Raiders. However, NFL insider Jay Glazer has effectively shut down that idea. Glazer is one of the most reliable insiders in the game. One could argue he's right up there with Ian Rappaport. When Glazer speaks, people listen, and he's made it clear there's no chance Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll will reunite in Las Vegas. That means the Raiders will need to look elsewhere for their next quarterback. It's still interesting, though. Glazer also mentioned that not only will the Raiders pass on Wilson, but so will the Steelers. It seems like Russell Wilson is planning to find a completely new team to start fresh with. So, with Wilson off the table, the Raiders' search for a quarterback continues. Now, looking at the draft, there are at least two teams likely to pick a quarterback before the Raiders get their chance. The Tennessee Titans have the #1 overall pick, and the New York Giants hold the 3rd pick. Both teams need quarterbacks, but things could get interesting depending on how they approach their situation. The Titans might seem like a fit for Russell Wilson from a roster perspective, but since they have the 1st overall pick, that scenario doesn't quite add up. They could go after Cam Ward, the top quarterback in this class, if they're ready to move on from Will Levis. But if they're not entirely sure about giving up on Levis, things get complicated. Levis has a strong arm and good ball placement, but his biggest issue is processing information quickly and reading defenses. That's something quarterbacks often improve over time. We've seen guys like Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold get better in those areas. It'd be interesting to see if the Titans consider bringing in Russell Wilson and letting Will Levis develop for another year or two. But if they're completely out on Levis, they'll probably go ahead and draft the #1 quarterback. As for the Giants, they could be a team that takes a shot at Russell Wilson. They've got young talent, including a solid running back and a strong wide receiver. If they brought in Wilson, they could use that 3rd overall pick on the best offensive tackle, a defensive end, or another top weapon, maybe someone like Travis Hunter or Ashton Jeanty. The Giants have options, and adding Wilson could allow them to compete right away instead of waiting years for a rookie quarterback to develop. Let's be honest, most young quarterbacks take 4 to 6 years to find consistent success. Guys like Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen have shown that progression. Patrick Mahomes is the exception, not the rule. What he's done isn't typical. So it'll be interesting to see how these teams approach their quarterback situation. But as of now, it seems clear that the Raiders are out on Russell Wilson. But still, the Raiders have a few options to consider. The idea of getting Justin Fields is not a good one. He did not perform up to the mark in previous seasons. Even with the Steelers, his processing speed just isn't where it needs to be. If a quarterback can't quickly read pre-snap coverages or make fast decisions post-snap, it's a problem. Fields has shown that he struggles with these aspects in 2 different offensive schemes. At this point, the Raiders should not take a chance on him. And Steelers CEO also mentioned that they can only retain 1 QB, and that is most probably that will be Justin Fields. But there are other quarterbacks out there. Depending on what the Vikings decide, either Sam Darnold or J.J. McCarthy could be an option. There has been no shortage of speculation that perhaps the Minnesota Vikings could trade quarterback J.J. McCarthy, who was drafted with the number 10th overall pick in last year's draft. McCarthy suffered a season-ending knee injury before the 2024 season began. As he recovered, veteran Sam Darnold had a breakout year and led the Vikings to a 14-3 record and a postseason trip. That has led many to believe that the Vikings could stick with Darnold for the long haul, which may lead to a McCarthy trade. If the Vikings take that route, Bleacher Report's Alex Ballentine wants to see the Raiders strike a deal for McCarthy. A trade for McCarthy would be ideal for the Raiders for a few reasons. Not only would he give Las Vegas some hope for the future, but acquiring the young signal caller would also allow the Raiders to focus on other needs and build up the roster while having a potential franchise quarterback on a rookie deal. In the meantime, the Raiders could make a serious play for Sam Darnold unless he signs an extension with the Vikings beforehand. The Vikings face tough financial choices. Despite having over $61 million in cap space, signing Darnold could hurt their free agency flexibility to address other critical needs. According to Adam Schefter, the Raiders are a team who could show interest in Sam Darnold in free agency. The Raiders could sign one of these quarterbacks and let them compete in camp. Bringing in multiple options and seeing who steps up might be the best path forward for now. Let's not go against a rookie quarterback either. With Chip Kelly specifically, one has to realize he might actually prefer a rookie quarterback. There's a chance Kelly wants to run his offense a certain way and bring in a smart quarterback who can execute exactly what he envisions. Jackson Dart looks really good. This guy can make every throw with a very strong arm. Cam Ward should be a first priority. Beyond them, guys like Kyle McCord and Will Howard are also impressive. And with Chip Kelly, there's that connection to Will Howard, which could make things interesting for the Raiders. So it would be very interesting to see what the Raiders do end up actually doing at the quarterback position. More will be unleashed as free agency approaches in the next couple of weeks. After free agency, the draft is right there as well. If the Raiders don't go with either of these two routes, then it's going to be Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell again this year. And as we have discussed in earlier videos, that's also okay, because the offensive coordinator is the most important aspect of a quarterback having success. For example, Kyle Shanahan can take Jimmy Garoppolo to the Super Bowl, he can take Brock Purdy to the Super Bowl, and he could even take Gardner Minshew to the Super Bowl. If Kyle Shanahan is that type of coach, it means quarterbacks don't matter as much. It means that depending on the scheme and system, quarterbacks are going to play better or worse. This is evident when Gardner Minshew played with the Colts versus the Raiders. There's a big difference with certain quarterbacks under certain coaches. So Chip Kelly is a good coach, and the Raiders' two quarterbacks would have a lot more success with Kelly than they ever did with Luke Getsy. So let's see what ends up actually happening. Although it's called the offseason, it's really a team-building season. This is the process where teams are able to make moves, transactions, and get better. To be true, this is where the season is won. Now moving to another possible move that Raiders could make. That is on the running back position. Josh Jacobs recently opened up about how things ended with him and the Las Vegas Raiders. He shared that he really wished he could have stayed with the Raiders long term, but it just didn't work out that way. Jacobs made it clear that it wasn't his choice. After his incredible season, he wanted to sign a long-term extension with the Raiders, but the organization told him they weren't going to extend him. Instead, they placed the franchise tag on him for that season. Jacobs said that's when he realized the organization didn't want him for the long haul. He didn't specifically call out Mark Davis, but mentioned that the people in charge at the time made that decision. They chose not to extend him long-term. Technically, Jacobs could have signed a contract then, but according to reports, the Raiders and Jacobs never even discussed it. At that point, it seemed like Jacobs had decided he didn't want to stay with the Raiders anymore. From Jacobs' perspective, it's understandable. He had a monster season, wanted to get paid, and the Raiders never really made an effort to lock him in long-term. Instead, they were only interested in a one-year deal. Josh Jacobs is a solid running back, but running backs are generally easier to replace in the league, so it is not an issue with the Raiders letting him walk. However, what bothers the fans is that Tom Telesco didn't draft a running back in last year's class. There were a lot of talented running backs available, and the Raiders didn't bring any of them in. They picked up Dillon, but he hasn't shown much so far. Hopefully this year, with John Spytek involved, the Raiders will address that need. The run game really struggled last year, and a big part of that was due to the lack of talent in the backfield. Hearing Jacobs gives a different perspective on the situation. He deserved that extension after winning the rushing title, and it's fair to say the Raiders should have given it to him. Remember, he still played that final year with the Raiders, even though he didn't have to. He mentioned that his plan for that last season was to just play 4 games, since playing 4 games counts as a full season, and then sit out the rest. But he ended up changing his mind and decided to play the entire season. So credit to Josh for that. That's it for today. What do you think about the quarterback? Who's going to end up as a Raiders? And do you also want Josh Jacobs back to the Raiders? Write down your thoughts in the comment section. See you in the next video.